And my horse, I named, yeah, it was a white horse, and I named it after Dolly. So its name was Dolly. So
when Loretta Lynn passed away, she left behind a ranch that had been part of her life for over 50 years. But what nobody fully anticipated was what a closer look at that property would reveal. Some of it was extraordinary, some of it was deeply unsettling, and some of it raised questions that nobody who loved her music had ever thought to ask. The ranch had always been famous, but the full story of what existed within those 3,500 acres is something far stranger, far darker, and far more fascinating than anyone imagined it would be. A poor girl's impossible dream. Loretta Lynn's story began in 1932 in the tiny coal mining community of Butcher Hollow, Kentucky. Born Loretta Webb, she was the second of 8 children in a family that knew hardship better than comfort. Her father spent long days working in the coal mines, doing everything he could to provide for his family. But money was always scarce. The Webb family squeezed 10 people into a small wooden cabin. Winters were especially brutal. Without money for proper insulation, Loretta's mother found her own solution. She pasted pages from old Sears catalogs onto the walls, helping block the cold while giving the little home a bit of color. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make the house feel a little warmer. Life was simple, but it was far from easy. Like many young people growing up in poverty, Loretta dreamed of something bigger, even if she had no idea what that looked like. That chance appeared when she met Oliver Vanetta Lynn, better known as Doolittle, or simply Doo. The two met at a local pie social while Loretta was still a teenager. People around town warned her to stay away. Doo had a reputation for running moonshine, and many believed he was lazy and quick-tempered. But Loretta followed her heart instead of the rumors. At just 15 years old, she married the 21-year-old Doo and stepped into a completely new chapter of her life. It wasn't long before she became pregnant, and soon after, Doo surprised her with life-changing news. They were leaving Kentucky behind. The young couple packed everything they owned and moved across the country to Washington State, where Doo found work in the logging industry. As they settled into their new life, their family grew quickly. Betty Sue arrived in 1948, Jack Benny followed in 1949, and before long, Ernest Ray and Clara Marie joined the family as well. With 4 young children to care for, Loretta had more than enough to keep her busy. But even while raising a family, she couldn't stop singing. Music had always been part of who she was. The only problem was that she didn't believe in herself. Doo noticed it right away. He believed his wife had an extraordinary voice, but every time she sang, she doubted whether she was good enough. Determined to change that, he bought her a $17 guitar from Sears and encouraged her every chance he got. Day after day, he reminded her that she could stand alongside the biggest names in country music. Loretta wasn't convinced, but Doo never stopped believing. Eventually, he heard about a local televised talent contest in Tacoma, Washington. He encouraged Loretta to enter, even though she was terrified. With shaky nerves, she walked onto the stage and gave it everything she had. The judges loved her performance. Winning the competition didn't make her rich. In fact, the prize was simply a wristwatch. But the real reward came afterward. A Canadian businessman named Norm Burley happened to hear her sing that day. He immediately recognized something special in her voice. Convinced she deserved a real opportunity, he paid for Loretta and Doo to travel to Hollywood to record several songs. When Burley heard the finished recordings, he believed in them so strongly that he created an entirely new record label called Zero Records just to release her music. Still, Loretta and Doo knew that recording a song was only half the battle. people actually had to hear it. While Burley worked on building the label in Canada, Doo launched his own promotion campaign. He mailed 3,500 copies of Loretta's first single, I'm a Honky Tonk Girl, along with publicity photos to radio stations across America. Nothing happened. Not one station responded. Most people would have accepted defeat, but the Lyns refused to quit. Instead, they packed their car with records and started driving from town to town, personally visiting radio stations across the country. They couldn't afford hotels, so they slept inside their car. Meals often came from simple sandwiches eaten on park benches. Every mile they drove was another gamble that someone, somewhere, would finally give Loretta's music a chance. That relentless journey eventually brought them to Nashville. Success came with a price. When they arrived, they received the news they had been hoping for. While they had been traveling from station to station, I'm a Honky Tonk Girl had quietly climbed to number 14 on Billboard's Hot Country Songs chart. For an unknown singer releasing her first record, it was an incredible achievement. Suddenly, doors that had once been closed began opening one after another. Loretta was invited to tour with the Wilburn Brothers, one of country music's biggest acts at the time. Soon afterward, Ernest Tubb invited her to perform on his famous radio program, Midnight Jamboree. That appearance introduced her to an even larger audience and led to one of the greatest honors in country music. She was invited to perform at the Grand Ole Opry. For any country singer, stepping onto the Opry stage meant joining the biggest names in the business. It was the kind of opportunity artists dreamed about, and for Loretta, it confirmed that all those miles on the road had been worth it. As her career gained momentum, she began searching for stories to tell through her music. She didn't have to look very far. Her marriage to Doo was filled with passion, but it was also filled with conflict. His temper could explode without warning. Arguments sometimes became violent, with dishes breaking and objects flying across the room. Loretta wasn't someone who quietly accepted it. She often fought back just as fiercely. She later admitted that whenever Doo hit her, she hit him back twice. On one occasion, she even smacked him with a skillet full of creamed corn. One fight became part of family legend. During a heated argument, Loretta struck Doo so hard that several of his teeth reportedly landed on the floor. She immediately feared what would happen next. Instead of exploding in anger, Doo simply burst into laughter. Their marriage was messy, complicated, and often painful. But those experiences also became the foundation for many of the songs that would later make Loretta famous. She wrote about real life because that was all she had ever known. Around that same time, fate introduced her to someone who would become one of the most important people in her life. In 1961, Loretta performed I Fall to Pieces on the radio. The song had already become a signature hit for Patsy Cline, who happened to be listening at home while recovering from a serious car accident. Patsy loved what she heard. She immediately sent her husband to invite Loretta over to the house. The two singers connected almost instantly. Patsy became more than a friend. She became a mentor, helping Loretta adjust to life in the music business and offering support whenever she needed it. She even bought curtains for Loretta's home when money was tight. Their friendship was so close that Loretta later shared stories that perfectly captured Patsy's sense of humor, including the unusual gift of some of Patsy's used clothing. It was the kind of friendship built on complete trust, and it remained one of the most meaningful relationships of Loretta's life. But while Loretta had found a true friend, she was also learning that the music business wasn't always as kind. She had signed with Surefire Music, the publishing company owned by the Wilburn Brothers, and they helped move her from Zero Records to the much larger Decca Records. The opportunity seemed perfect. Then she discovered the fine print. The publishing company controlled the rights to her songs, leaving Loretta without ownership of the music she created. It sparked a legal fight that would stretch on for nearly 30 years. Despite the setback, her career continued to soar. Her first Decca single, Success, became exactly what its title promised. The song stayed on Billboard's country chart for 16 weeks and established Loretta as one of the genre's fastest rising stars. Ironically, many of those early hits weren't songs she had written herself. That changed after she gave birth to twins. Drawing from the emotions she saw around her during the Vietnam War, Loretta wrote Dear Uncle Sam, a deeply emotional song about a woman saying goodbye to her husband as he leaves for war. At a time when few country artists touched controversial subjects, Loretta wasn't afraid to sing about real families facing real pain. The song connected with listeners because it reflected everyday life instead of fairy tales. Then, just as her songwriting reached another level, life surprised her once again. Only 2 years after giving birth to twins, Loretta became a grandmother at just 34 years old when her oldest daughter, Betty Sue, welcomed her first child in 1966. With children and grandchildren filling the house, the family desperately needed more space. That same year, Loretta and Doo were driving through Tennessee, looking for a new home, when they stumbled across an aging plantation estate in Hurricane Mills. The property needed plenty of work, but they immediately saw its potential. There was just one unusual catch. Buying the ranch also meant buying the tiny town that surrounded it. It was an enormous decision, but the couple took the leap. They purchased the entire property, a decision that would eventually create one of the most famous landmarks in country music. As Loretta's popularity continued to grow, people increasingly turned to her for advice. One evening backstage before a show, a worried woman confessed that she feared another woman was trying to steal her husband. Loretta responded with a sharp, unforgettable piece of advice that instantly stuck in her mind. Later, when she finally had a quiet moment alone, she sat down and turned those words into a song. That song would become one of the biggest hits of her entire career and cement her place as one of country music's greatest storytellers. When Everything Fell Apart. Loretta poured everything she was feeling into a new song called You Ain't Woman Enough to Take My Man. The song struck a nerve with audiences across America. It shot to the top of the country charts and made history, making Loretta the first female country artist to write her own #1 hit. By that point, it seemed like there was nothing she couldn't do, except fix her marriage. Behind the success, her relationship with Doo was falling apart. His affairs became impossible to ignore, and one woman in particular pushed Loretta to her breaking point. Hurt and frustrated, she wrote the woman a letter. When Doo found out, he exploded with anger, telling Loretta to stay out of his business. Then he said something that cut even deeper. He told her he didn't love her anymore. Those words left a lasting scar, but instead of letting the pain consume her, Loretta did what she always did. She turned it into music. In 1968, she wrote Fist City, a bold, no-nonsense warning aimed at any woman who thought about coming after her husband. It wasn't polished or delicate. It was honest, fiery, and unmistakably Loretta. Not everyone appreciated that honesty. Some critics praised the song, calling it one of country music's most unforgettable titles. Others thought it crossed the line. Several radio stations refused to play it, believing its message was too controversial. But Loretta wasn't trying to shock people. She was simply writing about the life she was living. And the truth was even harder than her songs suggested. Doo's cheating wasn't the family's only struggle. He also battled alcoholism. Every time Loretta returned home from touring, she never knew which version of her husband would be waiting for her. Some days he was loving, other days he was angry and unpredictable. She later admitted there were times she dreaded walking through the front door, but for the sake of their children, she kept moving forward. Then another heartbreaking loss changed her life forever. Loretta's friendship with Patsy Cline had become one of the closest relationships she had ever known. Patsy had once told her she didn't believe she would live a long life. Tragically, those fears came true in 1963, when Patsy died in a plane crash. In one terrible moment, Loretta lost both her closest friend and the woman who had guided her through the early years of her career. Even through that grief, Patsy's lessons stayed with her. As the 1970s began, Loretta entered the biggest chapter of her career. She released hit after hit, becoming one of country music's brightest stars. Women especially connected with her songs because she sang about real marriages, real struggles, and real life. Her popularity grew so much that Procter & Gamble chose her as the face of Crisco shortening. By the end of the decade, the Academy of Country Music named her Artist of the Decade, making her the first woman ever to receive that honor. She had become one of the biggest names in American music. Before long, Hollywood came calling. In 1980, Loretta's remarkable journey made its way to the big screen in Coal Miner's Daughter. She was so excited about the project that she publicly announced Sissy Spacek would play her. There was just one problem. At that point, Sissy hadn't actually accepted the role. In fact, she had been trying to avoid it. She even warned the producers that if she took the part, she wanted to sing every song herself. She also admitted she wasn't much of a country music fan, but Loretta believed she was the perfect choice. She personally pushed for Spacek to play her, even after disagreements behind the scenes. Still unsure, Spacek spent time thinking and praying about the decision. Then something happened that she later described as impossible to ignore. While driving one day with her radio tuned to a classical music station, Loretta's song Coal Miner's Daughter suddenly began playing. Spacek took it as a sign. Once she accepted the role, she completely immersed herself in Loretta's world. She followed her everywhere, studying every movement, every gesture, and every detail of her personality until she felt she truly understood the woman she was portraying. The transformation amazed everyone. One day, Loretta visited the movie set and caught sight of actor Levin Helm in full makeup as her father. The resemblance was so remarkable that it stopped her in her tracks. For a brief moment, she thought she was looking at her father all over again. Tommy Lee Jones took an equally unusual approach while preparing to play Dew. Knowing Dew had little interest in meeting him, Jones reportedly tried to experience his lifestyle firsthand. His efforts eventually led to an encounter with local law enforcement that became one of the movie's most talked about behind-the-scenes stories. In the end, Dew respected Jones's commitment, and the two developed a genuine friendship. When Coal Miner's Daughter reached theaters, it became a major success. It opened at #1 at the box office and earned widespread praise from critics. The film received 7 Academy Award nominations and 4 Golden Globe nominations, while Sissy Spacek won both the Oscar and the Golden Globe for Best Actress. Loretta's life story had become one of Hollywood's biggest hits. Instead of slowing down, she turned her attention back to the ranch she loved. The tragedies that shaped her. In 1981, motocross promoter Dave Coombs visited Hurricane Mills while searching for a place to host a national motocross event. Loretta welcomed the idea, and the race became an annual tradition that continues at the ranch today. But the ranch would also become the setting for one of the darkest days of her life. In July 1984, her son, Jack Benny, was riding horseback across the property when he attempted to cross the Duck River. Tragically, both he and the horse were swept away, and Jack drowned. The loss devastated the entire family. Making it even harder, Loretta wasn't home when it happened. Years of non-stop touring had left her physically exhausted, and she was recovering in a hospital when she received the heartbreaking news that her son was gone. It was a pain no mother ever wants to face. Sadly, more difficult days were still ahead. Doo's health steadily declined over the following years. He underwent heart surgery in 1992, and complications from diabetes eventually became so severe that doctors had to amputate both of his legs. Despite everything they had endured together, Loretta never left his side. She put her career aside and devoted herself to caring for him. Their marriage had been filled with love, conflict, heartbreak, and forgiveness. But in the end, she remained committed to the man who had believed in her long before anyone else did. Just 5 days before his 70th birthday, Doo passed away. His death left an enormous emptiness. Loretta often admitted that without Doo, she might never have become a singer at all. He had pushed her onto the stage when she didn't believe in herself. Now she faced life without him. Trying to cope with the loss wasn't easy. She later reflected that she had gone straight from living under her father's rules to living under her husband's. Even after everything they had been through, she missed him deeply. For years after his death, she said she felt his presence everywhere she went. As always, she turned her grief into music, writing "I Can't Hear the Music" as a tribute to the man who had shaped so much of her life. Many artists would have quietly retired after decades of success. Loretta did the exact opposite. In 2004, at 72 years old, she teamed up with Jack White of the White Stripes to record Van Leer Rose. White produced the album and played alongside her, introducing Loretta to an entirely new generation of listeners. The gamble paid off. The album became one of the most celebrated releases of her career, climbing to #2 on Billboard's Top Country Albums chart, and proving that her voice still had the power to captivate audiences. Younger musicians admired her not just as a legend, but as someone who had always stayed true to herself. Over the years, Loretta became increasingly open about the painful parts of her marriage. In her autobiography, she revealed what she considered one of Doo's cruelest moments. During one of his affairs, he told her he was leaving her while she was in the hospital, giving birth to one of their sons. It was a memory she never forgot. Although Loretta generally stayed away from political debates, she publicly supported several Republican presidential candidates over the years, including Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump. Ironically, one of her greatest honors came from a Democratic president. In 2013, President Barack Obama presented Loretta Lynn with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, recognizing her extraordinary contribution to American culture and music. By then, she had achieved more than the young girl from Butcher Hollow could have ever imagined. But her health was beginning to fail. She battled pneumonia, suffered a stroke that forced her to cancel her 2018 tour, and broke her hip while working on what would become her final album. Even then, she refused to give up making music. Finally, on October 4th, 2022, Loretta Lynn passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 90. What they found in Loretta Lyne's ranch after her death left everyone speechless. Loretta Lynn had her ranch, Elvis Presley had Graceland, Willie Nelson had Luck Ranch, Dolly Parton had Dollywood. But what many people don't realize is that Loretta's beloved property grew into one of Tennessee's most unique attractions. Known simply as the Loretta Lynn Ranch, it became a place where fans could step into the world she built and experience the life she loved. Often called the seventh largest attraction in Tennessee, the ranch sits in Hurricane Mills, about 75 miles west of Nashville. Loretta bought the property in 1966 after a completely unexpected twist of fate. She and her husband, Doolittle Lynn, were simply driving through the countryside looking for a new home when they got lost. That wrong turn led them to a breathtaking three-story plantation house built in 1876. The moment Loretta saw it, she was captivated. The grand old home reminded her of the southern mansions she had seen in Gone with the Wind. She never imagined herself living in a place like that, but she could already picture raising her family there. There was just one problem. Once the paperwork was signed, the couple discovered the property was in much worse shape than they had first realized. While Loretta stayed busy touring the country, Doolittle threw himself into restoring the house from top to bottom. It took nearly a year of hard work before the family finally moved in during 1967. The ranch quickly became much more than a home. Doolittle had always loved rodeos, dating back to the family's earlier years in Washington. He had even organized rodeo events at their previous ranch in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. After settling in Hurricane Mills, he brought that same passion with him, building a thriving horse ranch that remained one of his favorite projects until his health began to decline. By 1969, the couple had turned those dreams into something much bigger. They hosted a summer-long rodeo series that ran every week from May through September. Fans came not only for the competitions, but also to see Loretta perform live, making the events a major attraction. Many fans also recognized the ranch because it played a major role in the movie Coal Miner's Daughter. As the years passed, interest in the property exploded. By the 1980s, it had become one of Tennessee's most popular tourist destinations. The ranch itself kept growing right along with Loretta's success. When the family first bought it, the property covered about 1,450 acres. But Doolittle was always looking to expand. Loretta often laughed that every time she came home from touring, he had somehow bought another few hundred acres. Someone had to pay for all that land, she would joke, and that someone was usually her. Eventually, the ranch stretched across roughly 3,500 acres. New buildings were added, historic structures were restored, and the property became almost like its own small town. It featured a one-room schoolhouse, a post office, a general store, a historic stone mill beside Hurricane Creek, a dam, and 2 bridges. In 1999, the property earned a place on the National Register of Historic Places. After spending years in the grand plantation house, Loretta and Doolittle made another change. Once their children had grown up and started families of their own, the couple left the mansion behind in the late 1980s and moved into a smaller, more comfortable cabin elsewhere on the property. For visitors, the ranch offered far more than beautiful scenery. One of its biggest attractions was a carefully built replica of Loretta's childhood home from Butcher Hollow, Kentucky. Beside it stood a recreated coal mine, like the one where her father, Ted Webb, had worked for years. Nearby, an 18,000-square-foot museum showcased costumes, awards, photographs, and countless pieces of Loretta's remarkable career. The ranch also featured an old West town, horseback riding trails, gift shops, restaurants, and even a Native American artifact museum celebrating Loretta's Cherokee heritage. Throughout the year, thousands of visitors arrived for music festivals and one of the property's biggest annual events, the AMA Amateur National Motocross Championship, which has been held there since 1982. For fans wanting the full experience, the ranch offered hundreds of powered campsites, allowing visitors to spend the night just a short distance from Loretta's own home. But staying overnight came with one more story that had fascinated guests for decades. Many believed the ranch was haunted. The stories were fueled by the property's long and often tragic history. Before the Lynn family ever arrived, the land had belonged to a slave owner who forced enslaved people to work there. During the Civil War, fighting also reached the property, and reports say that 19 Confederate soldiers were buried on the grounds. Loretta herself never dismissed the ghost stories. According to the family, one of the most frightening experiences happened when her young son, Jack, woke up one morning claiming that a ghostly soldier had been pulling on his boots. Ranch manager Will Rourke later recalled that Jack insisted someone had been trying to remove them while he slept. After that night, Jack and his brother Ernest refused to sleep in the room again. Even today, that bedroom remains closed to visitors, making it the only room inside the mansion that guests are not allowed to enter. The balcony also became famous for its own ghostly legend. Over the years, several people claimed to have seen the spirit of a grieving woman who had once lived on the property more than a century earlier. According to the stories, she wandered the grounds searching for the child she had lost. Family friend Anthony Bruto later joked that Loretta used to say, once she started seeing the woman in white regularly, she figured the house simply wasn't big enough for both of them. The stories became even more famous after Loretta reportedly held a seance with friends and believed they had contacted James Anderson, the man who originally built the plantation house. The legends eventually attracted national attention, with the Travel Channel sending an investigative crew to explore the ranch's paranormal reputation. Then, in August 2021, the ranch faced a tragedy far more devastating than any ghost story. Nearly 17 inches of rain fell across Hurricane Mills and the surrounding Humphreys County, causing catastrophic flash floods that claimed 22 lives. Among those who died were ranch foreman Wayne Spears and another longtime employee who had dedicated nearly 2 decades to working for Loretta before being swept away by the floodwaters. Despite the heartbreaking loss and widespread destruction, the Loretta Lynn Ranch slowly rebuilt. Today, it continues to welcome visitors from around the world, standing not only as a tribute to one of country music's greatest legends, but also as a place filled with history, unforgettable stories, and the lasting legacy of the woman who called it home.